Hello, hello, my friends. It is Andor, and welcome back to the Knights of the Nerd Republic. You know what to do, and stay profitable.
The Nerd Academy podcast is released weekly at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, available on our website at www.thenerdacademypodcast.com and wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find the Nerd Academy podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also help support the show by going to patreon.com/The Nerd Academy podcast, where every donation allows us to bring you more exciting content every week.
Hello there, and welcome back to Knights of the Nerd Republic, the show where your favorite nerds talk all things about the galaxy far, far, far away for the last 5 years. I am your host, Jared, the Dark Jedi Bachman Stubbs, and we are here to talk all about the second and final season of Andor. This incredible show has reached its end. Structure was buck wild. Tony Gilroy said himself, this is not going to be a podcaster-friendly show, and I kind of turned up my nose at that and then went, you know what, Tony? You win this one. I'm just going to talk about the season itself. But we are very, very excited to jump into it. I am not alone, of course. I am joined by longtime co-host, lore keeper, Italian stallion, the one-eyed knight, guy I saw a couple days ago at Fan Expo Philadelphia, Connor Cicchetти.
Hello. Yeah, no, it was cool. We got to reunite once again.
Yes.
In the city of the Super Bowl 59 champions, Philadelphia Eagles, and the hometown of my namesake. Yeah, it was cool. It was cool seeing Jared again.
Got to meet Charles Soule together, which was awesome.
We did, which it didn't hit me that I was about to meet him because I was so focused on like meeting the stars of Grimm, the NBC show that came out in the early 2010s, that I was like, oh, wow, I'm getting to meet Charles Soule too. This is wild. So, but yeah, I got my Fortress Vader trade paperback signed by him. So that's always, that's pretty damn cool.
I got the first volume of his Vader run signed, and I was like, I couldn't find a hardcover of Light of the Jedi in time, and I just kept forgetting to order one. And by the time I remembered, it was too late. And I was like, God, I don't have anything physical that Soule has written with me. And then, literally, as we were leaving Philadelphia, I remembered I had a copy of The Blade, just sitting on my bookshelf. I was like, motherfucker, I could have had him sign that, but I had him sign the first volume of Darth Vader. But it is not just myself and Connor. We are also joined by a dear friend of the show. Don't let the kayfabe and epic confrontations fool you. I love this guy, and I think he thinks I'm all right. We are joined by host of Triad of the Force, Goose.
What is up, fellow knights?
What's up, Goose?
Yo.
I don't know if we're doing video, but I was just like, I need a prop.
We are.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, well, there you go. Finally got to use my Vader lightsaber. How's it going? How's it going, gentlemen? Thank you for having me.
Great.
Fantastic.
You know, despite me being the absolutely like drooling Vader fanboy, I do not own a Darth Vader lightsaber, and I need to rectify that.
You know, I got it because, I mean, one, the Black Series that Hasbro does for the Force FX lightsabers are pretty spectacular. And when I was growing up and I was, into Star Wars fandom, and right before Episode 1 came out, the one toy that I always remember treasuring the most was my Darth Vader lightsaber. So in many ways, it was kind of like when this one was released, I'm just like, this is a good way to kind of come full circle from youthful, innocent Goose to tragic, tax-paying Goose. So started with Darth Vader's lightsaber and now continue my journey with it now. Although this one's not combat ready. This one's exclusively for, mounting up on a wall and forgetting about it.
Taking nice pictures with it and whatnot.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have. I think my favorite lightsaber I own. I have the Lord Starkiller lightsaber, the one that I just got a tattoo of. So many people are like, Jared's never going to beat the accusations. I never tried to fight them. I've never tried to fight them. But yeah, like I said, very excited to talk Andor. Before we jump into
I've heard of
that,
it. Heard of it.
yeah, it is
I
Connor.
heard it's a pretty good show.
Makes sweet mouth love to a Chipotle burrito as we talk about Andor.
Takes practice. Takes practice.
You know what would pair well with that burrito you got there, Connor?
Cerveza
I think
Cristal.
Sunday was Bloody Marys.
Goose. I see. Enough time has passed with the Cerveza Cristal memes
I don't
for it to be funny again.
Well, I have to give the kudos on that one, Alex over at Star Wars Explained, because he was able to weasel it into his latest Easter egg video, which I thought was hilarious because he's
I haven't
maintaining
watched
the
that
bit.
one yet. That makes me so happy.
Sorry to ruin it.
No, you're good. Whenever I got to go on their live stream covering the Bad Batch, it was the week of the Cerveza Cristal like takeover of the internet, and he had something set up in StreamYard. I don't know how he did it. That like got like a freeze frame live in the StreamYard to do that Cerveza Cristal. Like
it's so
zoom
good.
in.
The commitment to the bit that they've done, and then obviously their costume on at Dragon Con, superb. So I commend them for keeping the meme alive.
Indeed.
Sensational. That's his word.
But if you're not drinking Cerveza Cristal, what would go nicely with that Chipotle burrito is Sunday's Bloody Mary. You guys know the drill. Sunday's Bloody Mary has the most badass Bloody Mary accoutrement in the galaxy with their 3-time award-winning spicy Caesar mix, as well as their mild and traditional mixes if the spice ain't for you. This former bartender can recommend only one pre-made Bloody Mary mix, and it is Sunday's. It is the only Bloody Mary mix capable of surpassing a from-scratch Bloody Mary. So if you want to forever up your bloody game, go to sundaysbloodymary.com/shop and use the code TNAP at checkout and help out your favorite nerds while you do it. But
was this an ad spot? I'm not an expert.
This is an ad spot.
Interesting. Oh, well, good for you.
The only sponsor of the Nerd Academy podcast.
Well done.
That I only managed to get because of low-key doing a bit on Twitter.
Well done.
So I'm having the honey chicken Chipotle burrito because I've never had it before, Jared.
Yeah.
So this is my first time trying it. It's not bad so far.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. This is Andor review and also a
and Chipotle review. Yeah.
Yep.
But Goose, I'm gonna throw it to you first, man. Andor, we all love it. We all think it's great. I have a lot of complicated opinions about the show that have been well documented up to this point. How are you feeling going into this second and final season, and how are you feeling kind of coming out the other side here?
There's a lot of emotions with Andor, and maybe it's because the woke mind virus is eating my brain, like a worm, or like, I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna put a bear in my car and just dump it on Central Park because of this virus. But I think I'm Andor pilled in many ways, because season 1 was such a massive home run for me, and it hit that sweet spot of the type of Star Wars that I really wanted to have. And that's not an indictment on the rest of Star Wars. I love all of Star Wars, but Andor was particularly up my alley. So once season 1 wrapped up and season 2 was gearing up, I was extremely excited, but trepidatiously, right? Because it's just like, how can you follow up almost perfection, right? And we were expecting to get a couple more seasons, but then it was just reduced to just the one final one. So lots of not concern, but caution approaching it, because I'm just like, well, how do you condense all this timeline that you were going to do in all of these seasons to lead in directly into Rogue One into just one season? So there was that concern, but for the most part, I think that the show really hit. And obviously I have criticisms and things that I think could have been better, and nitpicks here and there, because what kind of Star Wars fan would I be if I didn't have a nitpick? But on the whole, I think that season 2 really delivered, really did a lot, and I'm extremely satisfied. I mean, maybe it's a bittersweet because I would have wanted more, of it, and I think that that's where some of the pieces of the show kind of lacked, is just needing more fleshing out of some of the pieces and how certain arcs connect to other arcs. But on the whole, I'm very happy, and that's a printer that's going on down below me, and I apologize for that. But I think the only thing that has been the most negative for me so far from Andor is kind of seeing some of the discourse online. But I'm sure we'll get to that.
Of course. It wouldn't be an episode of this show without crashing out over discourse. No, I'm inclined to agree with you, Goose. I like, season 1 was such a trip, and it was exciting in many ways to get like a very like boots on the ground, kind of in the muck look at the reign of the Empire. And I said so many times during our coverage of season 1, and have said online many times, that if Star Wars is a series, is a story that hinges on hope, kind of just the idea of hope kind of being the linchpin that holds all of it together, that gives it any type of like emotional and thematic continuity across all of these very different stories, that kind of like the ultra buffet of Star Wars. It's always been hope. And that the thing that Andor does that is so different is that, as I've said before, it paints in the negative space of hope. It is always hinged on the dramatic irony that is, despite how grim and upsetting and visceral some of the horrific things that happen in this show. Everything from, the Imperial takeover of Ferrix, what we see on Narkina 5, Bix's torture on Ferrix, all of these horrific things. We all know in the back of our minds, no matter how bleak it gets, a little wizard twink farm boy is going to blow up the Death Star, and is going to set off a chain of events that will bring about the end of this empire and its emperor twice.
Yeah.
Uh, and that was kind of like the thing that I was like, I love that it's playing in this space. And going into season 2, like you said, I had that trepidation of like, how the fuck are you going to condense like 5 or 4 seasons worth of television into 12 episodes, across 4 weeks, with 3 dropping each week? I was like, out of its goddamn mind. And it was out of its goddamn mind. And I respected it. And as crazy it is to say, coming out of an arc as bleak and depressing and regrettably real feeling as the Gorman Massacre arc, was the first time it felt like we were no longer painting in the negative space of hope, that it was just outright a sense of it can only get better, because all of the people who want to make it better are officially in play and are ready to do so. And everything before that I thought was stellar. I will also say that like there was a sense of adventure and pulp that this season had, that I think was like part of what left me wanting for that Star Warsy goodness in season 1. There are absolutely moments that I was like, "Oh yeah, this is Star Wars to its core." And there are other times where I went, "I doesn't quite feel like it right now." There are so many moments in season 2 that like, Cassian trying to do the TIE Avenger heist. That felt like Star Wars in its DNA. All of the stuff with Mothma in the Senate, everything on Yavin, especially the final episode stuff of Yavin. It had that Star Wars feel that I can't quite put my finger on, and I can't quite define, but it was there, and I felt it in my bones. So yeah, I am flabbergasted that this bananas format worked as well as it did. As you said, doing it that way, it leaves a lot up for interpretation. It leaves a lot of dots half connected. There are a lot of things I wish we could have seen. But on the whole, absolutely blown away by this season. Connor, if you are not too preoccupied by your burrito.
So
How are you feeling going in and coming out?
So going into Andor season 2, yeah, I guess the thing that really intrigued me the most was how is this 3-episode arc gonna work?
Mhm.
How's the time really gonna pass? Like what's gonna not what's gonna I don't want to say what's gonna get left out, because power of hindsight, we have figured out what kind of gets left out in terms of like character. Oh, sorry. In terms of like character stuff, which we'll get into later. But what's the word? I guess, yeah, I was interested to see how the format was going to work, how well it was going to get executed, and what sort of like how we're going to see Cassian's journey, and what happened with Gorman, because I remember that being a kind of a big talking point before the season of like, oh yeah, we're gonna get to see the Gorman massacre, guys. We're gonna get to see what happens on Gorman, and I'm like,
yeah, not a lot of times that people get excited about a massacre, but it was, yeah.
Isn't that such a weird quirk of Star Wars? Isn't that such a weird quirk of Star Wars for a second here? Is that the amount of people who are like, oh man, I can't wait to see what this is all about.
Yeah, but then all of a sudden an SA scene happens. It's like, oh no, we can't have that in our Star Wars. And it's like, wait, we're okay with child murder.
Vader wouldn't
and
condone
genocide.
this.
No,
Yeah,
not going
like,
down that
what are
road.
we-
We're not going down that road
I
again.
know.
What are we
I go
even
down that
doing?
road. I just had to say it.
We
But
had to.
I guess I was just most interested to see, like, I guess, all the references and tie-ins to Rogue One, considering like Tony Gilroy was basically the director of Rogue One, and the showrunner for this show, which I think a lot of people are going to forget that he wasn't the original showrunner for this.
I forgot that many times myself. That like
it was Stephen Schiff from who did the Americans probably his best work.
I remember when that was announced. And like it's so wild to think about how this was originally meant to be a straight up spy thriller, and it became like this like political drama.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is it plays with like the spy craft and whatnot here and there, but it is so much more about the internal politics of the Empire and it kind of caving in on itself.
And it's insane because the ISB, like, we'll get into it, but like, dude, I could take a whole fucking season of just ISB board meeting scenes.
Yeah.
Well, but it speaks to the writing, right? Because in
Oh,
the hands of like some other writers, like that might just be dreadfully boring and you might want to gouge your eyes out and fall asleep, but it's a testament to the care of the craft in this show that it made all of that so engaging, right? Because it's one of the things that people really criticize about episode 1 or other films that are quote unquote talky, but there's
oh dude, imagine
it's important to talk. I don't know, we're
it's
not
important,
talking
yeah.
like how do humans and people
But now you're
communicate,
making me think like what if the Andor, like, obviously this would be insane to think about because 20 years apart or so, put the Andor writing team on the prequels.
Way less fun.
I mean, yeah, that's true, but like in terms of the dial, I don't know. Yeah.
There would be no aliens, and they would not deign to give us an alien important character until like the last 20 minutes of Revenge of the Sith, when Yoda would finally show up a la Radis in the final episode.
Yeah.
But
Look, I don't
true.
want to get too spicy here about the prequels, because I know the prequels are having their moment, especially since we're in the 20th anniversary of all of them and all that stuff. But there's an argument to be said about maybe some improvements, perhaps that some dialogue could have been tightened here or there. But that's what I'm going to say about that, because we're not here to talk about the prequels. That's for another episode, and I'll go off on that one.
Yeah. No, for sure.
I love the prequels. Don't get me wrong. I love them.
And it's okay. I had my crash out about Revenge of the Sith when we did our 20th anniversary episode for May the 4th. But no, But moving on from that, I do kind of want to talk about characters because I do think that, like, Connor, but I mean, both of you guys alluded to it, particularly with the ISB stuff. Like, first of all, Anton Lesser.
Oh my god.
I don't think I can confidently say he's my favorite performance in this show. But when everybody keeps talking, I mean, again, because I've heard I would take a whole show just about the ISB. I don't know if I go that far. I would love an ISB book narrated by Anton Lesser.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good.
Because I can't, because like he turned in a performance that I truly, and like literally the only other performance I could compare this to, in terms of it strains me to think of a different person playing this character to the level that they do in such an iconic way. It's like Willem Dafoe is the Green Goblin level of like I can't not see that character, read that character in other forms of media, and not hear Dafoe's voice, and not like just feel that like sadistic griminess that he brings to Norman Osborn. Same thing here with Partagaz. I can only anytime Partagaz shows up in anything, I hope they throw as much money as they need to Anton Lesser for him to play him. Because I don't want to hear any of those just like that like verbal masturbation version of speech that he gives every time he opens his mouth. It's always some type of turn of phrase, even when it's just like short sentences. Shit like save the sermon for Palpatine. Like, oh god, I fucking love it.
Calibrate your enthusiasm.
He's just a whole new genre of Imperial officer, and I love that. It's just because like that archetype is like, it's one of those things specific to Star Wars where you'll have your Tarkins and your Thrawns, who are like deadly efficient in their job and know that they are like heads of a multi-headed dragon. Like, they're aware of the fact that they're not the only one in the fucking room and the only person in charge, but they know how much their presence means. And then you have grovelers and bootlickers like your Piets and your Moddies and etc. I think you get like a step and a half up from your grovelers and you arrive at like a Krennic or a Dorinda Price. But Partagaz is his own flavor of motherfucker.
Well, he's kind of, and I think Andor serves as this as well. He's kind of a bridge, right, between, and I don't mean this disparagingly, but kind of like the cartoony flavor of villains from Star Wars, because everyone's over the top, right? You have Vader, who's dramatic, and Palpatine, who is even more dramatic. But then Partagaz comes in as like cool, calm, and collected. As like I mean, obviously he's a villain because he's in the Empire, but he doesn't come in as a villain. You know what I mean? He's just a guy doing his job and trying to do it well.
And then there's the fact that Krennic's a fucking diva in this show.
That's exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Because then which is why season 2 I think works really well as that bridge between Andor season 1 and then Rogue One, because then you kind of have these worlds start to collide all of a sudden between the fantastical things of the saga and the cartoony Star Warsy stuff, and how it's meeting and grounding itself with like all this rugged efficiency of the boots on the ground and bureaucracy of the ISB and the rest of the Empire apparatus.
Absolutely, and like you were saying with that bridging element, like, I love the way you phrase that, because that is where I think Partagaz falls, is that like he is aware that he is not the only guy in the room, but he still takes charge of the room he's in, similar to a Thrawn or a Tarkin, but like he is also paramountly aware of his disposability, like a Piet, Mahdi, Jajarad, like all those guys. But he is above the groveling of a Krennic. Like, he is this like happy medium that I just needed to make sure we talked about him before we get lost in the sauce of like our Luthans and our Cleos and our Cassians and Vixes, etc. That like he just brings such a brilliant performance. And I don't necessarily know if that he's my favorite character in the show. However, he might turn in my favorite performance. I could listen to him speak for hours. all the way back to, thesis, please, like shit, like all the way back there. And now, anyway, but Goose, starting with you, who's like your kind of like standout characters this season that
I mean,
you glommed onto?
it's cliche, right? And everyone's talking about it. And I have to preface saying that I was extremely lucky to have gotten like screeners for season 2. So I had seen it, a week before everyone else got
I
the
was about
chance
to ask. I couldn't remember if you got the screeners or not. Okay, cool.
I did. And it was, I mean, it's awesome, right, to see something before everyone else, but it's also it's a curse, right? Because then you're like, God damn it, I need to speak to people about this, but you
Yeah.
can't. And I remember while I was watching the season, the 4th arc, and seeing the Clea episodes and being like, this is spectacular. Like for me, yeah, the the Gorman arc was out of this world, but the whole Clea arc for me was something truly special. And we always knew in season 1 that Elizabeth Dulau as Clea and Clea as the character were really cool and were the brains behind the operation of Luthen. And there was something really special in that performance back in season 1, but to then all of a sudden have her character be reeled in a little bit for the first 2/3, three quarters of the show, and all of a sudden like let her go loose there at the end was something that really blew my mind. And maybe because I like smaller stories, like for me that arc was absolutely my favorite, and in no small measure because of Elizabeth Dulau as Clea, and she deserves every single accolade that she is getting, because like that performance was a powerhouse. I mean, she
Absolutely.
carried that first episode of that 4th arc on her own. I mean, obviously there's little Clea in the flashbacks, but for the most part, that's just Elizabeth Dulau, and it's just incredible. And I know everyone's talking about her now, but I've been waiting to talk about her for 4 weeks, and I will not stop raving and throwing every flower and accolade that I can her way, because she just was incredible. Like that performance was so nuanced and so powerful and understated too, because she's not doing anything outwardly, dramatic, like maybe a Krennic, right? But I think that subduedness and subtleness in how she carries herself and how she performs when she has to disconnect Luthen and everything, I think it's just something that if she doesn't get nominated, I mean, award shows are bullshit, but if she doesn't get some noms for this, I'm going to be very upset, because she and the rest of the cast, let's be honest, deserves like every acting award for their performance in this season.
Absolutely. I mean, people are already stomping for best ensemble in a dramatic role for the SAG Awards, and I very much think that this show deserves that praise, at the very least ensemble, so that everybody gets their flowers. I agree with you so much about Clea. To again kind of paraphrase a brilliant Force center term, as I'm off to do. They talk about like the emotional canon of things, and like you said, like little younger Clea had so much time to like speak. I think they on Force Center said you're the bearer of the themes, which I thought was a funny phrase. But like she got to the younger version of her got to speak on so much explicitly, and the direction and the performance marry so well that like she doesn't have to say a fucking word during that little black op into the hospital to make sure Luthen is allowed to die, which is a big theme we'll talk about here in a minute. But you're so right. Like there are just so many little beats that she has and moments with her that are just that are fully unspoken, that are just so subtle and so poignant. And I think they sing, they absolutely sing, and she, like you said, she deserves all of the praise that she's getting right now as kind of the MVP of the final arc. 100%. You have any other standout characters? You got Clea. Any other big hitters that stood out to you? Because I know I got a few that I really want to
I
Oh,
mean,
no.
I have to give it up to Ben Mendelsohn as
Oh,
Krennic because
my baby.
as much as we've already seen and loved Krennic in Rogue One, to see this particular flavor of Krennic here, and especially again in Arc 4 when he like does that finger, on the top of Dedra's head, I'm just like, this is like like, how do you come up with that? I have no idea, but it's a testament to the powerhouse that is Ben Mendelsohn. So, I mean, again, and like Denise Goff did an amazing job as Dedra. Obviously, Genevieve O'Reilly crushed it as Mon Mothma. But I think I have to give it up to Ben on that one, just because we've seen Krennic, but it's a new interpretation somewhat of his character in Rogue One. So that definitely was a welcome surprise, because he's not in the show that often, but every scene he's in, he eats it up.
Absolutely. And the eating it up, what I think is really fun, and it speaks to like this big theme. Right before season 2 started, we did an episode with friends of the show, Alden Diaz and Ken Knapsack, and we were talking about kind of like the themes and the politics of Andor, and how one of the things I love that, again, like, is not unique to Andor, but it does in a particular way that is different from how Star Wars typically does this, is that the Empire is so big, it is inevitable that it will fail. And that there are just, and Luthen has that moment. It's like, there's too many lines. We're lost. That is true of the Empire, but to the nth degree. They're freaking out trying to get their hands on Cassian Andor, trying to hunt down this singular criminal when they already had him in custody. And because he did the incredibly deft trick of giving a fake name, the military that killed the Jedi missed this one fucking guy.
Well, and it also goes back to A New Hope, right? And Leia's quote to Tarkin: "The more
Precisely.
you clench your fist, the more star systems will slip through your fingers." And it's that whole thing. It's like they're so focused on Axis and Cassian that they're kind of forgetting that these rebellions happening on the other side.
Yeah. And like what you said with like this new look at Krennic, what I think really is there is that, as you were talking about, the Imperials who feel like they're in charge when they're in the room, is this really funny wrinkle where every Imperial feels like they're in charge until their superior shows up and just absolutely reduces them to atoms. Dedra is riding high, head bitch in charge, like just burning shit down. And then Partagaz tightens the reins, and then she crumbles. And then Krennic tightens the reins on both of them, and they both crumble. And we're seeing Krennic get to have his moment as the guy in the room. And then you start Rogue One, and immediately Tarkin takes him out at the knees, and then he's taken out at the knees again by Vader. And it's just watching all of these people keep fucking eating each other, while our rebels are slowly realizing we have nothing if we do not work as a fucking unit. None of this works. If we are busy squabbling and these pissing contests, it nearly destroys the rebellion because of their near brush with inaction to, take the fight to Scarif. And like you said with Krennic, like I think that is what makes him so entertaining this season, is getting to see him fully in his element, being this smarmy, just fucking bastard who just loves his job. And I agree with you completely. And just Krennic, Krennic is my favorite Imperial who can't use the Force. Like to take him like out of like the bucket that would put him in the same room as like Vader and any of the Inquisitors, like to pick him out of there and go any non-Force using Imperials, it's like Krennic by like 3 miles, and then like Thrawn, and then Dedra. Like literally like Krennic all the way up in the sky. And not to say anything poor about Dedra or Thrawn, but he is just so fun to watch, and it is the unfortunate like byproduct of the beautiful decision that Rogue One makes, that everybody lays down their life for this victory on Scarif. But it is the unfortunate reality that all of these characters have such a defined shelf life that like it is so hard to come up with a contrivance to get to see characters like Orson Krennic in anything, because he has such a definitive endpoint that you cannot muck with at all.
I mean, but animation is a good medium to kind of start filling in some of those gaps in those relationships. Because I mean, we know for a fact that Thrawn and Krennic are fighting for funds. I mean,
Yep.
we read that a little bit or a lot in Thrawn Treason. So I would definitely love to see how those two fight, because obviously Thrawn's gonna be calm, cool, and collected, and very monotone about it. And I can just see Krennic just throwing a fit about it. So
Being
see how those
absolutely
two
messy.
would interact about Death Star versus TIE Defender program. And would be a beautiful thing. I think it's a fun thing too to put the other Mendelsohn that hasn't been with, the other Mickelson that hasn't been with Mendelsohn in the same room and see how those two interact. Although
That's why fanfic exists.
true.
Yeah.
But
Connor,
don't use AI voice enhancers to make your fanfic. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Or
Never
just
do
use
that.
AI. Just don't use AI in general.
Don't use AI. Yeah.
Yeah,
true.
that's what
Yeah,
the
that's a good. That's a good way to cap it.
Yeah, just
don't.
Don't fucking
Connor,
use it.
Connor, who are your standout characters for Andor season 2?
Oh, that's a good question. So obviously Clea. So I'd probably go with your guys' picks of Clea and Krennic because, Clea, just her last arc really highlighted her tenacity as a character and sort of like just making sure that not only making sure that Luthen was able to pass away and not be interrogated by the Empire, but also getting the information out to Cassian about like this super secret like project that the Empire is working on. Other standout characters, Bix, duh. And I think honestly for me, it's like, the best Bix moment, just bar none, is the end sequence in episode 6. Like that, like we'll get into it, but
When
like
she bombs that facility on Coruscant.
oh yeah. Dude, when she kills Dr. Gorsu, dude, I was fucking like maniacally laughing in terms of just because of how hyped up I was. Like I was freaking the fuck out because like I'm sure we all thought that like, oh, this is a dream sequence at first. Like, oh, she's been able to conquer her dreams and she's having this dream. And then it was the moment where she's walking out and the Imperial officer is like, hey, no one's allowed to be in here. And she shoots him. I was like, oh shit, this isn't a dream. And just that moment, dude, that shit hypes me up every time. That is bar none my favorite ending to any Andor episode in the 2 seasons. I fucking love that moment because I just solely on a character level, I fucking love that moment. And I just love Bix's story. I'm glad she survived. I am very, very glad she survived because, like, I don't know about you guys, I thought she was going to die. I thought she was going to get killed somewhere somehow, and that was going to be the reason why Cassian is more emboldened to, go with the rebel cause. But it's not, and
So-
I like it, even though I'm not a huge fan of her having a kid. But we'll get into that.
I was gonna say, well, I'm glad I part of that was there's a lot of character based conversations to be had. So kind of try to see how organically we can get to them. I want to talk about the Bix of it all because I have a lot of feelings. I have a lot of feelings. I have a lot of opinions. We talked about it, when we were dumb enough to think we were going to talk about this show weekly. We did talk about the first arc, and it was no secret that I had a lot of opinions about the Bix sexual assault scene. The more I've thought about it, and I kind of came to this conclusion on the episode, but with like 3 weeks, 4 weeks distance from it, I can confidently say I think 97% of my umbrage with it happening at all is a mix of editing and a lack of a content warning. I think that is like fully where I can land on how I feel about that scene, because I think mileage will vary for this for everybody on the planet. But I think you can get away with the lack of a content warning if you eliminate one shot from that scene, and it is the Imperial officer dragging her towards the bed. I think, like, the more I think about it, the more I feel that specific moment in that scene is a little gratuitous. Um, where like you could show that the act, like the fucking bare knuckle brawl they get into, and like end with her just mollywopping him with the hydro spanner, him staggering out, collapsing, and you can even keep the moment where she says he tried to rape me. Like that. That the word being used, I think, is like the least, like, for lack of a better term, controversial part of that. It's the dragging that I'm like, this, like we I think we got too close to it happening for there to not have been a content warning. I think if you have a content warning, keep it as it is. Without one, ending it with the clear implication of what he is trying to do, and then the, like, kind of climax of that scene being she beat this sack of shit to death with a hydro spanner. He didn't even get the quick blaster bolt of it all. But I did find Bix's arc as a whole compelling. I love this idea that, like, how do I put this? It reminded me in some ways of what Rose Tico says in The Last Jedi, with the whole, that's how we win, not by destroying what we hate, but fighting for what we love. And I think that in a similar vein to, could Finn have potentially blown up that, like, laser drill thing by flying his skimmer into it? Maybe, but we wouldn't. But, like, there was no way of knowing for sure. He could have burned up before he got within a foot of it. But you're more valuable to this fight, to this cause, alive and capable of leading and capable of being in the room. And I think Bix's arc is very similar to that, in that, aside from her recognizing that, like, Cassian will pick her over the rebellion and therefore she feels she has an obligation to remove herself from the equation, I think she also understood on some level, like, there's more I can do helping the people, like, on Mineral, just being in the galaxy with the beliefs I have, than necessarily being somebody with a blaster in my hand blowing up ISB facilities on Coruscant. And I like that for her a lot. Like you said, like, I think everybody we know has said, very glad she was not fridged. I very much was like, okay, she's going to die a horrible fucking death, and it's going to be, why Cassian is so gung-ho by the end. And I thought it was a very interesting decision. Like I said, I like kind of like the narrative symmetry with those Last Jedi themes. And I can go either way on the kid. So I'm going to throw to Goose for the Bix of it, because I want to hear your thoughts on all of that, in particular the kid of it all, because I'm hearing all sides of it, and I can kind of go either way. And it's rare for me to not be like, this is my opinion. But yeah.
Look, for me, that whole discussion about Bix is very interesting because I wasn't really expecting a lot of the discourse around it. So it's one of those moments where when I saw what the discourse was and where it was coming from, it's like, oh, okay, maybe there are things here that me, from my point of view and my experience as a straight man, just don't really think about, because I don't connect with things in that sort of way. So it was a big moment for me to just kind of take a pause and be like, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this so much. Maybe it's more of a moment for me to start listening to see, like, why other people don't feel a different way, and why maybe I'm not seeing it that way. So I've deferred this conversation in my podcast to my co-host, and she's had her opinions on it. Uh, obviously I have mine, and it's been a very interesting conversation because I've talked to my girlfriend a lot about it, and it's been very productive in terms of how we look at media, how media represents women, how women respond to their representation in media, and it's not simple by any stretch of the imagination, especially when a show that's this complex and talks about such different subjects that are extremely complicated to talk about are being also written by men who are doing their best, right, at writing female characters. That being said, I think that there's a lot of complexity to Bix that I think serves her character. I have my gripes about how some things were established about her, but in terms of the sexual assault, I didn't see like it was out of place personally because we celebrate in fandom the murder of children. It's a meme at this point. We
Yeah.
see Princess Leia in a bikini tied to a slug, and she's not there because she wants to be, right? And she didn't wear that bikini because okay, Jabba, I'll just put it on. So there's a lot of implication about and seeing
Leia
Twi'leks
didn't take
used
it off the rack. It was
exactly
taken off of a dead Twilight.
yeah, and and Leia didn't want to wear it. So there's a lot of abuse against women that's always implied in the Star Wars universe that
For
we just
sure.
kind of don't think about actively because it's a Twi'lek. Twi'leks are prostitutes, right? Like no one thinks about it twice, even though it's just like, well, but she was chained to Jabba the Hutt and then she got eaten by a rancor. And that's violence against women in a children's movie. So it's one of those things that we don't think about actively, but it's still there. Just like we were talking about how Andor is not doing anything politically that the rest of the Star Wars movies haven't done before. I would argue that Star Wars also has done this before. It's just not in the explicit way that we've done it here. And it's one of those things where it's kind of a damn that you do, damn that you don't, because you kind of don't want to acknowledge that, but at the same time, in a show that's talking about fascism and authoritarianism in the way that it's does so explicitly, it's also a disservice to women to not acknowledge that this violence and cruelty happens against them, not just on the authoritarianism, and fascism. It happens every day in democracies and unprompted by people that are supposed to be their allies. So it's like we have to reckon with that and try to acknowledge like why in society do we not want to talk about it but are okay with it happening behind the scenes and let colleges cover up all these things. So obviously it's complicated. I understand the point of view of having the content warning in front of the episodes. I think that is totally a fair argument and I'm not against it, but I'm just like, yeah, like the Empire, they're not nice guys. And they're
No.
not just nice guys by shooting people in the chest, you know. So that's what I have to say about like that part in particular. In terms of the baby, I've talked about it in my like in the last episode of my podcast. I think the interesting thing about it, at least to me, is the
Which
plurality.
to plug again for anybody listening, Triad of the Force. If
Oh,
you're not
thank you,
listening to
thank
it,
you, thank you.
damn
It's
fool.
we're cool
You
a
have
little
it on
bit.
the screen next to your name, but I wanted to put it out there.
But I understand, right, that there's the different waves of feminism and how they engage with being a parent and child rearing, all these things, and it's empowering to choose not having a child in a society that, especially now with JD Vance and those freaks within their natalist movements and stuff. I see how it's icky to be like kind of contributing to that narrative by showing Biggs having a child, but it's also empowering to choose to have a child, right?
Yeah.
There's women that want to, right? There's women that want. My sister wanted to have kids. Is she not a feminist because she has 2 kids? So I see both sides of it. So that the crux of baby Andor, because we don't know the sex of the baby, right? Everyone assumes it's a man because this is a patriarchal society, but maybe it's a daughter. No one knows. It was the framing of it, right? When she's doing her goodbye holo recording. Not it wasn't a holo recording. Her goodbye recording to Cassian. It was very framed towards him. It's just like, I'm doing this so you can do what you need to do, and it wasn't about like I also need to be a part of this rebellion. I think if she had more not agency, because she did have the agency, right, of saying like, I'm doing this and I'm gonna do it, and she did it. But it was framed through the lens of like, I'm doing it not just because I want to do it, but because you have to do something else, which was very kind of the aspirational thing of a female character towards the hero of a story. So I think that framing of her exiting the show when she did, I think that was kind of like the mistake in that, because I think that just framed it in a very patriarchal way, unintentionally so. Because I don't think that when Tony and the rest of the writers were kind of figuring this out, they were like, oh yeah, because women just go home and have babies. I don't think that
No,
was the intent, but it's much more complicated than what I'm trying to express, hopefully coherently. But I will say on this one, I'm trying to do a lot more listening and a lot more learning, because it's not it's not simple. And I think that when there's a group of people that feel marginalized through media, their voices are very important in terms of why they feel that way. Because I sympathize, because if, like, I, as a Latino, as a Puerto Rican, saw some representation of my people done incorrectly, and I was complaining about it, I wouldn't want other people to be like, well, blah blah blah. You know what I'm saying? So,
for sure.
you know,
And
I'm rambling now, but hopefully it
no,
makes sense.
no, it does make sense, because you put into words something I've been struggling with. And it is that element of Bix's departure that was a weird sticking point for me. Because Andor season 2 plays so much with these themes about choices
Mhm.
and how your choices affect others and how much you're willing to sacrifice for others for what you want.
Mhm.
And I have mixed opinions on pretty much everything Bix gets to do in this fucking show.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think it's acted incredibly. I think in terms of just scripting, it's great. But I think it does Bix a disservice in some ways by putting her in this position where she is incredibly
Mhm.
reactive.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, and like you were saying, I would have loved if Bix was like, yeah, I think I'm kind of distracting you and making you take your eye off the ball here with the rebellion.
Mhm.
And also, I don't think it's good for me to have a blaster in my hand every day. Like,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
a little bit more of her explanation on
Yeah.
that. Her big moment in the earlier episodes, which, Connor, I agree with you. I think it's an incredibly cathartic moment, and it's great, and it's rah rah Bix, kill that motherfucker.
Mhm.
But it's also just another instance where somebody told Bix, "Hey, go kill this guy who already
Yeah.
fucked you
Yeah.
up."
Yeah.
And it's a lot of those things that's kind of keep happening to her. Bix's big moment in the first arc is this sexual assault into her having the rah rah moment of beating the guy to death with a hydro spanner and then popping the guy who was with him.
Yeah.
And incredibly cathartic, incredibly rah 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 moment. But it's also like it puts Bix in this weird position where like horrible shit just keeps happening to this
Mhm.
one
Mhm.
fucking person, and her whole story is just reacting to every horrific thing that happens to her.
Yeah.
And I do think there's room for that criticism, and I do think it's valuable. And I, like you said, like M, formerly from Pink Milk, was on Bombadcast, and I was
Mhm.
very excited to listen to her thoughts
Mhm.
on this arc. I hit up Goose because I know he's the person I know who's had the longest time to think on the show. So I haven't had Goose on the fucking
Yeah.
show in forever. I was like, God damn, I gotta have him on.
I mean, but there's
But there is valuable to listening to female fans right now.
Yeah.
Like that there was just paramount value on that. I got through basically all of my initial "this doesn't belong in Star Wars" opinions talking to Taylor
Mhm.
about that scene, and she hasn't even seen this fucking season yet because she just started Narkina 5. So like I was like, okay, spoilers, but like I need to talk to a woman
Mhm.
to make sure I'm thinking about this in a
Mhm.
positive way. So I agree with you on so much of that.
And I think that a couple of tweaks, right? I think not necessarily fix, but I think help improve some of that. And I think it's part of what you said about Bix being passive, right? All through arcs 1, 2, and 3, she's trying to get into letting Luthen and let her do something in terms of the rebellion and get into do some spycraft and things. And I think it would have been cathartic to see her actually be on a mission. I mean, the show's called Andor, so like I don't think we can spend a lot of time seeing everyone's missions, but see that she's actually doing something after getting the catharsis of getting her revenge on Dr. Gorst. But then also a little thing like that final scene not being in Mineral. Maybe she's in another rebel base, that's kind of a smaller one, but she's there with the baby doing comms or something, and then she walks out and takes a breather, so for hope. But you still see that she's she's mothering, but she's also rebelling, and I mean, I don't know. I don't know if people will agree with me. I don't know if that's actually a good solve, but
that's a good point. That's a pretty good point. But I think I like a lot. Yeah, no, I think again, patriarchal society, patriarchal framing, all that. I guess what I like the most about her being on Mina Rao was like, on one hand, yeah, you could be like, why the fuck is she here again? Like one of the worst things that ever happened to her happened here. Like I'm very
on a long list of terrible shit.
Yeah, on a long list of terrible stuff. Why here? And then, but on the other hand, it's like she built as we could tell in the first arc, she built a very solid community here. And so I guess not only being able to raise the kid, but also I guess just sort of help out there. I think is just probably her contribution to the rebellion. I don't know. I mean, I think I like that. That's pretty cool. But again, I see both sides of this.
Yeah. And like with the kid and the morale of it all, like I said earlier, I like the idea that she went that, and this is my interpretation of it. Again, I think I wish she had more agency in it, but I like the interpretation of that. Like my place in the rebellion may not be with a blaster fighting and killing and spycraft and all of this stuff. It might just be like,
I don't know,
mutual aid.
Really relished in killing a fascist doctor.
Yeah, and he had that coming. But like I said, my interpretation of it was her going like, I need to walk away so he can keep his eye on the ball. And I don't think the frontline soldier thing is my thing. I think I'm a mutual aid person. I want to go back to this planet that I know needs that mutual aid. I like that angle. And the kid of it all, I hear and wouldn't even say that I disagree with a lot of the like, all of those stereotypes and patriarchal tropes we've been talking about. But like talking about the like thematic language of Star Wars and how like one of the very big overarching, kind of like glue of the franchise themes is like what we do for the next generation being such a big theme and idea. There was a part of me that like that does love that choice, of going like, yes, like we all know that Cassian Andor is about to heroically give his life on the beach of Scarif, but it is not in vain. It is personally for him, not in vain. Like, especially when so much is said about how the Rogue One crew are the unsung heroes of how the Death Star was destroyed. That these complicated, imperfect heroes are not the ones who will be written about in the history books like Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie, etc. That it is like people like Cassian Andor who has an ugly past, who's done some heinous shit, who did some heinous shit the day before he enabled the destruction of the first Death Star. All of that can be true, and also what he did laid the groundwork for the next generation in a much more personal way. And I think it also is a great, callback to the your father would be proud of you, Jin. Like, does he know he's a father? I don't fucking know. Probably not. But like it gives that scene an extra weight to it. That like he doesn't understand that, like, while he's telling Jin your father would be proud of you, that one day little baby Andor is gonna grow up and be like, my dad served on Scarif. My dad helped bring the Empire to its knees. That first real victory against the Empire, that was him, guys. That was my dad. And
that character's called Poe Dameron.
And
I know a friend of mine who would hate that theory. Like, I mean,
It's
she's
the dumbest
crashed
theory
out.
in the world.
She's crashed out to me about that theory specifically. And yeah, I get it. Cause like her, because I guess the reason why I'm not a big fan of the whole like Andor baby thing is because of her. It's because of her. Because like she's a mother. She's talked to me many times about how she just does not like the fact that Hera had a kid in season 4, and just sort of went on a tangent about that. And I guess just listening to her made me like paradigm shift that, and I was like, I never thought of this. So just like you, Goose, I was like very just listening and just like, I never thought of that. And it just kind of, shifted my perspective on stuff.
Yeah, it's important to shift perspectives. Otherwise, what are we doing? What are we doing?
Otherwise, we turned into I'm not gonna get into it.
I mean, I know what you're saying.
And I think we paid that the lip service it needs. I wanted to talk about it because it is kind of a bag of cats that is kind of weighing on this on a lot of incredible final moments for this show. But yeah, so we got Bix agreed on Krennic and Clea. Were there any other standout characters you had, Connor?
I mean, not he wasn't necessarily a standout character, but oh wait, no. Wait, I have 1.5. I'll go with the half first. He's not necessarily a standout character, but it's kind of insane to think about how like none of this really would have been possible had he not leaked the information to Luthen, and that is one Lonnie Young.
Unsung hero of the rebellion.
Unsung hero who was killed.
By the rebellion.
By the rebellion. Because like I guess it was just so interesting seeing him like do his thing in the ISB, because it's like, oh, okay, we know you're working for the rebels, like, but like we know that obviously the Empire doesn't know that. And it was so interesting, I guess, because like there was all this stuff throughout the season of like the Empire just being clueless and just being like, what the fuck's happening? How do they know this shit? Like, what the fuck? And then it's like right under their goddamn nose. And I think the thing that I think, honestly, Lonnie Young, I'm pretty sure he probably planned this, but his masterstroke had to be the fact that it was like, oh yeah, I'm going to frame Dedra for all this.
Like, well, no, he waited, right, to go into her files. He had the access, but didn't do it until it was absolutely necessary.
Yeah, but like I'm a unintentionally frame this woman who's been trying to, use this access thing as her like promotional jump, and she's gonna get imprisoned. Like that, I think was his like unintentional masterstroke. But another standout character, and it's a character we all know, Benjamin Bratt as Bail Organa, man.
Gotta give credit's due.
Shit. Like I was gonna be like, I figured he probably wasn't gonna be in just that one scene in like episode.
Yeah, you don't get Benjamin Bratt to just come in 5 seconds.
But I was like, I hope that's not the case. But then he like
at that point they could have gotten Jimmy Smits if it was for like 5 minutes. They
could have like recorded him on Zoom and then just CGI'd him, composite him there. But
no, he was just so good as Bale, so goddamn good. I got nothing really else to say. Like his scenes with Mon Mothma and then his scenes in the final arc are just fantastic.
Yeah, like it was, and I have to give kudos to Benjamin Bratt really for that, because it's one of those things where when that scene and again, kudos on top of kudos. Kudos to Tony Giller for doing it the way he does it, because and he explained it right in that interview. He's just like, I'm just gonna shove him in this scene so that people can talk about it, get it out of their system before he actually comes in proper and does his thing. And I thought that was such a good way to approach it, because it does help you, psychologically prepare for, oh, it's not Jimmy Smits. And once he comes in as Bail Organa proper, right, in the next episode that he shows up, it was such a welcome surprise because you don't really know what to expect. It's just like, is this going to be a different characterization? Is he just gonna do his thing? Is he gonna do an imitation of Jimmy? Like, what's this performance gonna be? And then to see him kind of not do an imitation of Jimmy Spitz, Jimmy Smits, but capture the essence, right, of Jimmy and Bale, and have that gravitas and just command the screen, and you just buy it immediately. And that's, I think, a testament to the quality of the thespian that Benjamin Bratt is, because in the hands of another actor, it would have just felt like a dude cosplaying Bale, but when he performed, I believe that he was Bail Organa, and now we're extremely lucky to have two space puppies be Bail Organa, and the more the merrier. So I'm here for dual space Latino Bail. It's just alternate between the two, and I'll be happy.
I had a moment with I was I
just
had
thought of
such
a
a hard
random.
time getting past it. I had such a hard time getting past it, and it was nothing bad about Benjamin Bratt's performance. He was great. I agree with everything you said, but like the Jimmy Smits' Bail Organa is
He's
one of
a
my
bear,
favorite.
and he's a big imposing guy, and then Benjamin Bratt's just this little
Yeah,
tiny guy.
but especially with how like soft spoke, like Jimmy Smits period in all of his roles, but like especially with Bale, he has such a particular cadence.
Mhm.
And there's such a particular texture to his voice that like I was missing so much that I was like, ah man, like Brad's great, but like all I can hear is Jimmy Smits and like wishing he was here. But Benjamin Bratt at the last moment, got me fully with that. May the force be with you, Captain. And I went, that's Bail Organa. That's Bail Organa. Okay, I'm sold. We have 30 seconds left of the episode, but sold. But yeah, no, I absolutely loved it. He was great. Obviously had a hell of a role to step into.
Mhm. Not easy,
Like
especially it's a kind of almost a thankless task, but from what little I've seen, right, I'm in my liberal bubble of blue sky, so I don't really get to see what the clusterfuck over on Twitter is nowadays. But insofar, it feels like the fandom has been welcoming of Benjamin Bratt's performance, and that's kind of a bizarre thing to happen because this is a very brutal and thankless fandom that any little thing that is a pebble on the road to new Star Wars stories is just the worst thing in the world, and they'll just lash out against anyone for it. So it happens to Star Wars authors every time. They get all the backlash from everybody. Any creator gets a backlash. We've seen actors get backlash from fans for just doing their job, right?
yeah,
So to see Benjamin Bratt kind of not have to go through that, because it could have gone that way. People are like, no, Jimmy Smith is my Bill Organa, and that's the end of the story, and fuck this guy. But the fact that I don't see that having happened, it's a miracle. So the force was with him, that's for sure.
absolutely. For me, in terms of standout characters, it's kind of a shared arc between Cassian and Luthen. Because when we get to like the penultimate arc with the Gorman massacre and then the extraction of Mon Mothma into this final arc, and we realize that not only is Cassian not on good terms with Luthen Rael at all, there's this resentment towards Luthen's methods that like we kind of collectively as a fandom when watching the first season went, oh, we see how we see how cold and clinical the heist on Narkina or on Aldani is, and we see like Luthen's like it will, if you think you're even for a second he'll talk, kill him mentality, that like, oh well, that's why Cassian's like this in Rogue One. And then we get like this span of 2 years where Cassian's like, fuck Luthen. I'm on Yavin. I don't answer to him anymore unless shit is on absolute fire and I am absolutely needed. And it takes will to be like, hey man, I need your help. I need you to get in the shit with me for a Luthen job. And Cassian's like, I'm only doing it because it's you, and I'm only doing it because it's an emergency. What I love so much is with Cassian going into Rogue One, now that he knows how high the stakes are with the Death Star, is that it seems like a retroactively very well written backslide for him. That while the chips are down and the stakes have never been higher, Cassian is like just primally aware of the fact that if I am slipping for even a moment, if I am not cranking on all cylinders every second, we could all be fucked on a level none of us could imagine. So I love him falling back into those Luthen ways because he knows what the stakes are. And that felt like a weird character snag going into the Gorman arc that I was like, well, how do we resolve this? With Luthen, what I love is for him, I alluded to it earlier, the whole I must use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. And how he and the Empire are now both looking down the barrel of this shit is too big to actually manage anymore. And I don't know what to do with it. And the weight is getting crushing and our knees are buckling. And that angle in and of itself I thought was great because it paid off that idea of I'm using the tools of my enemy. I'm using this callousness, this coldness that the Empire uses so well to fight them when the Mothma methods, the Organa methods are already proving to be way more effective than all of this cloak and dagger, everybody's lying to everybody, thing. He had, I think Luthen, and this is not to do like a, anybody resisting any anti-fascist or any anti-fascist using any form of violence or anything to fight a fascist organization is just as bad as a fascist. I think anybody who's spoken to me for more than 5 minutes knows that's not my fucking opinion. But I love seeing in that Star Wars duality way that Luthen is acting more and more like the Empire in many ways. That whole, he's like, we're more valuable to him separated. He's kind of eating everything to a point where he is so incredibly untrustworthy, and people are looking over their backs with Luthen just as much as everybody in the ISB is looking over their back. That, Hirt is looking at Dedra, who's looking at Partagaz, who's looking at Krennic. Like that sense of paranoia is starting to spread into the rebellion. And if he is in some way not excised from it, he will spell their demise because they cannot function like them anymore. And I thought that was such a deft touch. And I think it colors everything we learn about Luthen in his final moments so well. And it puts such a neat bow on him being this delightfully complex bastard that every great thing he has ever done, every important, momentous thing that he can be credited for, comes with the caveat of all of the arguably unjustifiable blood that's on his hands to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That his methods were, as much as he wanted to be, I'm the smart one, I'm the one, he's the one with a vision who knows what he's doing. For all of that bluster, it's still how many dead on Aldhani? That family that Cinta is very clearly implied to have killed, and your Take-Homas and your Lonnie Youngs, that it's like, look at all of these people that he did not have a second to go, maybe they should live. That callousness that he is just as willing to let the Gormans get annihilated as the Empire is. Because it is just as useful to his cause as it is to theirs.
But I think one of the interesting things of Luthen too, especially this season, is how he kind of becomes a mirror to Saw, because they're both on that up. I mean, it's because it's a triangle. One of the cool things about storytelling, seeing like these triangles of relationships, and obviously the big one here is Rebellion versus Luthen versus Saw, and in many ways, Luthen becomes Saw in a way that he was trying to avoid, because in season 1 he wants to. I mean, and it's one of my favorite quotes, right, of the whole series, like season 1 and 2, is when Saw just comes up to. I mean, when Luthen comes up to Saw and just tells him, "Aren't you just tired of fighting with people who agree with you?" And it's one of those things where since then, Luthen and Clea, right? Because Luthen's not working in isolation. They're both partners. They're both trying to build a rebellion and bring all these groups together so that they can function as one unified front. But because their tactics are becoming more more akin to what Saw is doing, they're kind of being shunned from the unified front that they were able to build, as opposed to Saw trying to distance himself from everybody, but still needing them at the same time because he needs their resources and their intels to be able to do everything, but they kind of don't want him. So it's kind of like this push and pull in every direction of everyone trying to get what they need to fight the same fight, which I think is one of the most genius master strokes also that Tony has put in this show, is the commentary of why liberals keep losing elections. Just like, yeah, because we like no one everyone's looking at the trees instead of the forest. But yeah, Luthen spectacular, especially with the added context of his backstory through those flashbacks and the sacrifice that he was willing to make, right? Of just taking himself out with a Clea assist, obviously. But it's beautiful, right? Because he's willing to do what no one else is willing to do, which is just lay down his life through through himself. And a lot of people are just like, rebellions are built on hope, but you have to add to that rebellions are built on sacrifice. And Luthen sacrifices everything to the end, literally.
Yes. And everything you said, yeah, like, and
I will
it is that
say,
tragic. One moment, it's that like tragic flashback of how he and Clea came together. And it's exactly that. Like, look at the horrendous thing he was a part of, but look at what it created, and that is Luthen's legacy of, like, for every incredible thing, there's a heinous act behind it, and it is so beautiful. What were you gonna say, Connor? Sorry.
Okay. So just because you and I were talking about it prior to the final arc of how do we think Luthen's going to go out? Did not expect how he went out.
No, with his Nautilin bleeder.
Yeah. When I heard when he started talking about the Nautilin bleeder and they showed it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's getting used.
Yeah.
I did not expect it to be like, oh yeah, he's going to use it on himself.
I mean,
Chekhov's
but the writing,
bleeder.
the writing in that scene when Dedra just shows up and he says,
Oh, yeah.
there's only 2 items that are of questionable origin. And then when she's like, oh, and here you were, under our nose the whole time, under imperial comfort. And then he just retorts with and I knew you all along. Hardly seems fair. It's just like, oh, such a good back and forth between the two of them. Even though that he knows that he's done, he's still able to get those last jabs in to be like, I still win.
Yeah, there's a whole galaxy out there waiting to discuss you.
Which is also great. And I also love that, like, again, it speaks to the, the scrappiness of the rebellion versus, like, the just bloated nature of the Empire. Like, Dedra for weeks was rehearsing that fucking monologue in the mirror, or that every beat of what she had to say to Luthen was something she had pre-planned. And Luthen had to improv all of that, and he still won that verbal duel. He still won that verbal duel, despite the fact that he had to just react. That it was just so brilliant. And obviously, like I said, there's like Luthen and Cassian as like kind of like their arc together and how they mirror each other, and Luthen's mirroring to the Empire. Also, Mon Mothma this season, man, my God, like I will say, and this will kind of be our segue into like this next segment before we get into like final thoughts when we talk about favorite episodes and favorite arcs. I gotta say, the last episode of the Gorman stuff with the Mothma extraction, I think that's my favorite. I think that's my favorite episode of this show. Period.
That was such a good episode. I think my favorite moment from that episode specifically, Jared, was, and this is just due to Diego Luna's acting, I think. I always forget how good he actually is.
He's so fucking good, man.
Was when they're walking out and the Clovis, the
driver,
and Diego's like, "What's his name?" Or like she tells him he's an ISB plan. She's like, "All right, what's his name?" He's like, and he just starts feigning the whole like just this happy, this excitement of, we found her, and then just fucking caps him.
Doo-doo-doo!
And then there's that, like, I'm sure we've all seen the reaction image of like Genevieve O'Reilly just
Yeah,
going,
he's
yeah, like
But
just that's probably my favorite moment of like him just feigning that excitement and then just immediately capping the guy. But yeah, that episode was really good.
it's so good, and it
It's a palate cleanser in a sense.
It is.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's the beginning of that hope. It's the beginning of like the show no longer painting in the negative space, but like actually like picking up a very broad brush with vibrant colors and going, this is where the fight actually begins and we can start winning soon. And you know, that whole episode is incredible. Mothma, you know, they're like she's terrified by the circumstances and it's ugly and it's scary, but she never falters. She never falters. This is the first time she is in the muck. Maybe
She
the only
does
time
crash
she's truly in the
out,
muck.
but she never falters.
But she
Yeah.
at no point does she ever go, no, take me back, take me back, take me back, take me back. There's never a moment of hesitation from her. It is moments of fear. It is a moment of, oh my God. But she never is willing to not commit to what's happening.
Yeah.
And it is just so great. You know, like I think Alex Damon pointed out with that whole moment where like she sheds like the ornate Senate, overrobe to put on this soldier's jacket. And you know, and that is what that moment is. And there's an obvious adjustment period for her. But it comes with that like with that that resolve that she has, that this is terrifying, but it's necessary and we have to get through this. That I truly think that's my favorite episode of the whole show. The final episode is incredible. The build up to the bridge into Rogue One is amazing. You know, stuff with the Force Healer I've been thinking about so much. But just that extraction, A, was the most Star Wars the show ever felt like to me. But B, it was just everything about that episode was everything I wanted it to be. And it was incredible. Absolutely incredible.
You just reminded me too. I just remembered the lady who was the ISB agent was from Lonnie Young's like unit or whatever. So it's just really funny just thinking about that. I wonder if it's just funny because like I'm sure he sent her out not thinking she'd die, or maybe he was like, fuck it. So
yeah. Goose, favorite arc and episode.
It's been really interesting to see what people have, and I apologize for the cat.
No, never apologize for a cat. Never apologize for a cat.
What people really kind of latched onto, because it's fun to be like, oh, people see this differently than I did, and she's gonna knock down the water. But because you guys were talking about the Mon Mothma extraction, which don't get me wrong, I think that episode was amazing, and I think for the most part, every episode in season 2 has been a joy to watch. But for me, that extraction episode, as good as it was, I can't help but like look back on it and just be a little sad, because Mon Mothma's speech, man, like I know that everyone was hyping and loving it online, but for me it was mid. I'm just like, it just fell so flat to me. Not
I thought it
because
was a tad. I thought it was a little short.
my
I was
problem with
expecting.
it.
I guess because of how everyone was. Sorry, Goose.
No,
I
no,
guess
please.
I guess just how everyone was talking about it, both in the fandom and just like, I guess rumblings from like the Star Wars guys of like, oh yeah, you know this speech by Genevieve was awesome and everything. I guess I expected it to be longer, but I get why I understand why it didn't need to be, but at the same time, it's like there's probably a lot more that Mon Mothma could have said.
Right. And I think that's my issues. You said with a show that has had such amazing writing in the past. I mean, this is a show that gave us I Share My Dreams with Ghosts, right? So and Luthen and Saw Gerrera's speeches and everything. So pardon me for expecting something at that level, but it's not a slight
with a character who we know could deliver such an incredible speech, and probably deserves it the most out of all of them.
And after so much buildup too, but then I mean, I think the speech works well with how it's framed and the rest of the episode with the extraction and like who's the double agent, is Cassie gonna get her out, like all these things I think help heighten the messaging of the speech. But at the end of the day, the speech is just like, well, truth is important, and I'm like, well, thanks for that one, man. Like I didn't, who would have thought, so sadly, I just needed to get it out of my system, because every time I hear something about that episode, I'm just reminded of the speech and how much disappointment it brought to me. But that's, again, like I said at the beginning when we started recording, nitpick. And like a Star Wars fan, I have to nitpick. But it's it's a minor thing in an otherwise amazing show. But I think my favorite episode is the Clay at the hospital, and trying to get to Luthen. That third arc, fourth arc, and those first two episodes were a masterpiece to me. And like I loved them when I saw them, and I loved them even more when I watched them again, especially like those first two. Those first two work so well in tandem together that I'm just like, that's amazing, especially coming in from that first arc, which at first I wasn't too much of a fan of. Because when I started that's the season, I was just like, oh, this is very different flavor from what season one was. And when he gets to Yavin and I see the idiot rebels, I'm just like, I'm not sure that I'm gonna vibe with this. But the show definitely did a 180, and it was a crescendo to the end. And that coda with Clea and leading into Rogue One was just a masterpiece. And I mean, obviously, I can ask for more seasons because I'm a greedy bastard that way. But I'm very happy that we got what we got, because we're better for it.
Absolutely. Connor, favorite arcs and episodes.
So, in terms of favorite arcs, it's kind of funny because I don't really have one. Again, it might just be because I've only seen each of these episodes once, and I'll have to rewatch it. But I don't really have if I had to pick one off the top of my head, I would probably go with the final arc, and maybe that's just recency bias on that one. But it was just such those last three episodes, I think for me at least, the thing I was most intrigued by with the final arc was like, how are they going to answer pretty much every question that we have going into Rogue One? They answered most of them. And I guess the one question I was curious about the most is like, how do they know about the Death Star? Or like in this case, the concept of
a super weapon,
something that the Empire's working on. And we get that answered like that so quick, which again, one of the most fascinating things about just, I guess, Andor and Rogue One to me is the fact that like us as fans, we all know about the Death Star, but it's so interesting that these writers now have to retroactively be like, yeah, these characters have no idea what the fuck any of this is.
It's that dramatic irony that is like one of the best weapons in the arsenal of this show. And and I agree in terms of arcs. I love the full 3 acts of the final arc. Is just individual episode for me. It's the Mothma extraction. But no, I agree with all of that. It is that just poignant. Just even down to the episode title. Every time I've read the episode title for the final episode, it makes my hair stand up.
Oh yeah, dude, so
Jeddah, Kyber, Urso. It makes my hair stand up, man. It's so good.
Dude, the funniest thing from that episode to me was fucking Saw and Yavin. He's like, you have no idea where I am. And it's like,
and the fact that they've said you're on Jeddah multiple times in that conversation, you don't know.
It's like, stop trying to get.
He should have just said nice deceptions. Just to completely tie it back.
But yeah, I'd probably see
on the phone.
I am sad that we didn't get Borgullet here.
I've seen that one. Where's his origin story? That could have been a good one for season 3.
Listen, man, I'm astounded by the fact that Tony Gilroy would deign to give us this silly bullshit that is Admiral Raddus. So you know what? I'll take one Mon Cala if we're not going to get to see Borgullet.
Yeah, but yeah, I'd say favorite episode would probably be the Mothma episode. And then that's the other thing too. I guess I think the one thing that we'll get into, I'll just start it here, is the fact that like, the format worked, but at the same time, there were points in this show that like obviously could have used some screen time. Like, oh,
Mhm.
how are they gonna mourn Brasso? Because that kind of
Yeah.
sucked.
Yeah, gliding past Brasso it hurts. It hurts for
hurt.
him to kind of
And
be
I guess just
unsung by the end.
I mean,
not
but it made
being
sense to me. I mean, as much as I hated it, right? Because I love Brasso, especially after his victory cry in the last episode of season 1. But it kind of framed the show, right? It says war isn't glamorous, and
Yeah.
sometimes you die in the dumbest way, and it's just like, and you don't have time because then you have to go into the next fight, and it's like, damn, it sucks. But you know what else sucks? War. So
Yep.
I thought it was
Yeah.
not I'm not happy about it, but I'm just like, but I get it.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
guess
for
the
sure.
other thing that I wish we could have seen more of, I guess, is just I can't remember how one of our friends put it, Jared, but it was just about like I can't even remember. It was about Cassian's character himself, and I guess just sort of getting more out of his mindset and his perspective going into Rogue One. Because like there's a lot we can sort of like just figure out on our own. Like it's really not hard to figure out. But like I guess on one hand, because of that, it's easier to really connect the dots of like, okay, this is why he's this way and at the start of Rogue One. But at the same time, it's like, all right, I'd like to see more not ruthless Cassian, but like, why does he become this semi-ruthless person? But again, that's something we can kind of figure out.
Yeah.
And it's also this is something I really found funny. And I guess really helped inform his decision of why he did what he did in the first part of in his introduction in Rogue One, was when Draven was like, "Do you trust Tivik?" And then Cassian was like, "I try," which just showcases that like whole thing of like, I don't fucking know if I do.
Well, but it's kind of like now tragic because when you see in Rogue One, you see his interaction with Tivik, and you see that he then shoots him, and yes, immediately kills his source. You can't help but think like, oh, just like Luthen with Lonnie. It's just, oh, they're both
Yeah.
giving you information about the death. Oh, it just, I mean, and I think that's one of the great things about the show, just like the whole reframing of the film. I mean, I always loved Rogue One, but now it's just even more like, oh, like I know you a little bit more, and I know everything that's behind everything. So. Yeah,
Absolutely.
amazing.
And I think another thing that Rogue One, at least to me, at least with Rogue One and Andor, was be careful not to choke on your aspirations. It just gets so much. That line to me gets so much richer because of the stuff we see with Krennic in Andor, because of the fact that like you can tell he's vying for power and for like something big at this time, like at this point in Andor. So that's just something I want to mention. So
Absolutely. With all of that, I mean, obviously, we have so much of this show to talk about, and so much it's going to kind of be like stones left unturned that we're going to be discussing for years and years. I just kind of want to do like a final thoughts as we kind of close into conclusions. I don't want to keep Goose up too late. But yeah, any final thoughts, anything we haven't touched on that you want to hit real quick before we wind this down? So Goose, I'll throw it to you, man.
It's one of those things that it's bittersweet, right? Because Andor meant a lot to me when I mean, I was very cynical about the show when it was first announced way back in 20 who knows when, and I'm just like, I love Rogue One, I don't need this show. I was one of those, and I'm kind of glad that I was one of those because I got to be proven wrong so beautifully, because the show was so much more than I wanted, or expected to be possible, right, in the Star Wars galaxy, and expanded what the tapestry of Star Wars can be, and now we are the better for it, right? We have the Acolyte, we have Skeleton Crew, we have Mando, and we have Andor. Like, we have like all these different avenues of exploring Star Wars that I think is absolutely beautiful. And now that this show is over, it just feels, it's sad because it's the first Star Wars show that feels like it ended, I mean, live action show, that it ended on its own terms, doing what it wanted to do, all guns blazing. And and Tony has said it, like, right, it's a miracle that this type of show got done the way that it got done. So it's obviously we have things that could have been done better, but everyone's a critic. Hindsight's 2020. But the fact that a show of this complexity and this magnitude and this scope was able to be done, it's one of those things that I will never stop admiring, because I'm an architect. I work as an architect every goddamn day. So, like, I sympathize a lot with the film and TV industry, because I know how hard it is to have, to be a creative and be in a creative field and try to do the right thing and try to do the vision right of a project that you're passionate about, and then seeing all these forces that are around you trying to either distort it or tear it down or just block it from happening. So, like, I live that on a day-to-day basis with my job. So every time I see any Star Wars show, I'm just like, that's a fucking miracle.
Yeah.
Clone Wars, that's a miracle. Mandalorian, that's a miracle. Acolyte, miracle. So that's why I kind of always get a little sad when I see discourse online and see fans being like, oh, well, why didn't they do this? It's like, it's a goddamn miracle that anything happened to begin with. Because a show like Andor that dared to say genocide and talked about fascism in such an explicit way, it's just in 2025, with Trump and this authoritarian movement and all these corporate entities bowing down to the government, and then have this show from Disney, do all the things that it did. I'm just like, we should be lucky that we have the privilege to just tear it down. So yeah, so I'm happy that we have it, and I'm sad that we won't get to have more, so that we can have all the nuanced conversations that we've had since season 1, and now at the end with season 2.
Absolutely. And I love that point about, it's a miracle that anything exists. It takes me back, obviously a not celebrated movie, but it takes me back to that hilarious quote from Patton Oswalt about Blade Trinity, where he's like, I know the movie looks like hell, but if you knew half of the shit that happened behind the scenes, you'd take it from an F to a C just knowing what it took to make this movie exist, And when you
They had to
extrapolate that,
CGI Blade's eyes because Wesley Snipes wouldn't open them.
I know, which is one of the funniest things of all time. That's also one of the few times I've gotten to write an Epic Confrontations question, was when Eli did the exhibition match between Travis Grossman of the Nerd Academy podcast and Kelly Knox, where it was all nerd shit. And I got to write a round 2 Marvel question about one of the funniest interactions in any Marvel movie ever. And it was when Dracula asked Blade if he is ready to die in Blade Trinity. How does Blade respond? I was born ready, motherfucker, which is such a corny ass action hero fucking answer. It's pretty good. My favorite multiple choice option I put was "Bitch, I'm Blade," which
also a plausible choice though.
Which Alden hilariously pointed out the joke of it, and I was so glad he got it. Was that was not actually the answer to that was not an answer to the question. Blade ready to die, bitch, I'm Blade doesn't answer the question. In fact, it's the only part of the question he already knew your name. But Connor, final thoughts on Andor season 2, the series, and anything you wanted to talk about real quick before we pack it up. I know you got to have the format discussion, so I know that was what you wanted.
Yeah, you just reminded me that I wrote some Lord of the Rings questions.
That's right, you did.
And I wrote a very hard 5-pointer that I'm very proud of. Again, yeah. I'm evil when it comes to 5-pointers, so don't surprised.
Worry. Goose and I both know.
Yeah. Thanks. I guess the one thing that I really liked about Andor that, obviously I know some of the earlier live action shows couldn't really do because of COVID, supposedly, was the fact that they were able to build sets in Pinewood and do them there, because like just Andor just looks incredible. Like out of all the live action Star Wars shows, Andor, to me at least, is the best looking out of all of them. In terms of production design. And I just, that I feel like that should be the standard for all other Star Wars shows going forward.
If we
and if
get
there's
any
one
more.
show, what's up?
If we get any more.
Yeah. If there's one show that I wish that got that treatment, it has to be Kenobi. It has to be, for me at least. Because, like, dude, that is a story that was waiting to be told for like a decade. And like, it's still, for me at least, Kenobi still looks solid, but compared to Andor,
My hot
like
take is I don't give a shit about the volume being used
okay,
at all.
That's fair. Yeah,
I like it. No, that's no shade to Andor in the practical sets. The production design on this show is fucking remarkable. If it wins for nothing during award season, as Goose said, it's horse shit. But like, if it wins for nothing, at the very least, this needs to bring something up for production design. I hear what you're saying about Kenobi. I know our friend Trey has the same opinion. I couldn't give a damn less. That's just me being snarky.
But that being said, with Kenobi, I can pretty much look past most of that stuff just because I love the story so much. So, but yeah, really good show. I'm not as sad as other people that it's over, but I understand why most people. I understand. I get it. Why most people are sad. I guess I just can move on pretty easily.
That's a Jedi way, no attachments.
Well,
rejoice for those who join the Force. More
that's
also do not.
Well, it's also ADHD, so which apparently isn't real.
Well, not anymore.
I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, I just really good show. Yeah, really good show.
No,
I mean, who really would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thought the prequel spinoff to a prequel spinoff would have been this good? I did. I'm saving it for my final thoughts. I think this show is incredible, and I've had my issues giving it the flowers it deserves because I think the fandom conversations about it have driven me up the wall. I like we've said multiple times during this discussion, I don't think Andor has done anything politically that Star Wars has never done before. It just does it louder. It does it with a more adult tone. I think that it has the benefit of being accidentally incredibly prescient, or unfortunately incredibly prescient. At the moment, I know Tony Gilroy has said multiple times, the point of this show is that unfortunately it will always be prescient, but right now there's a little extra sauce on the side.
I think it's and I don't mean to cut you off, but
no,
I think it's a little BS that he's saying that because I was watching an interview that he was doing. I forgot who it was, but I was watching an interview he was doing recently where he was saying, "Oh, I've finally been allowed to say fascism." And then you can like him talk about being press trained. I'm just like that tracks because that's what I've always thought. They've told you what not, what barriers to be within, and obviously Disney is just like, don't talk about current events. It's like, we'll give you the bone. You can talk about fascism, but you cannot make it about current history.
Yeah, yeah, and that's unfortunate. I think. Far be it for me to go to bat for $1 billion corporation. I think that this show's existence and trying to promote it in the media is a clusterfuck in and of itself. We have media companies that, for better or worse, have a gun to their heads as well. So like on some level, do I wish these companies that have unlimited resources use them to fight? Yes. Do I also understand the threat to like all of the little people involved if they did swing a couple times? Also, yes, it's complicated. It's not black and white. It's still frustrating nonetheless. That said, the unfortunate prescience of this show is palpable. I think that the word genocide being used with the Gorman massacre, there's no getting around that. Had that season been made today, they would not have allowed that word to be used. They would not have allowed that word to be used in tandem with the egregious manufactured consent that is present here, with how the empire and the imperial access media gets to frame what's happening on Gorman as a bunch of brutish savages attacking their moral betters and their colonizers. It is the unfortunate reality that I do not think that phrasing would have flown today with every single eye on what's happening in Gaza. And again, Goose, I don't agree, but I hear what you're saying about the Mothma speech. For me, in the age of having a dictator in office who, with impunity, will just simply say up is down and blue is green, hearing the words that, the greatest evil is a loss of objective truth, it unfortunately fucking
Good point.
slaps
Good
right now.
point. I get it. I get it. I contextualized that way. I see your point.
Like that kind of, again, couldn't really predict it. Of course, you could base it off of the last administration at the time and go, oh yeah, like we can, the big crux of the Trump regime is making shit up, which has always been a little quirk of fascism. But in the age of just making shit up, in the age of the conspiracy theory president, yeah, that being the big send off for that speech, it hit a little harder than I wish it did. In terms of things that I wish we got a chance to talk about, Cyril Karn, what a performance, what a character. Truly one of the most Star Wars things in this show is watching somebody on the brink of realizing what they've done and being presented with the opportunity to do better or backslide, and him choosing that backslide so hard to find nothing in revenge, to find nothing, not even the dignity of your arch enemy knowing who the fuck you are, before unceremoniously getting doo-dooed in the back of the head.
That was wild. Like, that is just so fucking funny to me.
Yeah,
The fact
By
that,
a Frenchman, no less.
they go through this fight and everything, and Cassian just is like, "Who are you?"
I mean, it's the Andor version of Count Dooku's execution.
And you
Look
just
at
see
this
the
monster
light
you helped
die,
create. It's going to kill you now.
and just you see the light die in his eyes just a bit.
Yeah,
It's great.
and with how visceral it is. They were talking about it on Bombadcast. You can watch the inside of his skull light up a little bit when that blaster bolt makes impact. Incredibly visceral. But yeah, I've had my issues with the show that have almost nothing to do with the show and everything to do with the way it's discussed. I think the show gets away with shit that other Star Wars simply is not given the opportunity to. I think if The Mandalorian were ever structured like this, it would be raked across the coals, and it would never be given the grace this show was, of either you get this insanely structured second season or you get nothing. The Mando never would have gotten away with some of this stuff. Mando and other shows never would have gotten away with as much like, oh my God, look at this like almost mythical relic that is the Morlana 5 blaster Cassian gave Melshi, like being treated like the Skywalker saber. That would never have flown in anything else, but Andor can do no wrong, so it gets a pass here. The nature of K2's introduction, completely wiping away another canon story, never would have flown. Everybody else would have been trying to burn John and Dave at the stake.
They did that. They did a Bad Batch though.
With Bad Batch, most of
Tales of the Jedi.
Most of it's still the same for the most part. Tales of the Jedi.
Depends on who you ask.
Bad Batch,
I don't give it. I don't care.
I know. I think
Either
Tales
way.
of the Jedi and Bad Batch, you can do a little like canonical elbow greasing to get there, in terms of like, oh, the time of day is different and Depa Balaba has a blue lightsaber for some reason now, which is my least favorite Dave Filoni retcon, by the way. It's the one that pisses me off the most.
Fuck you, Dave.
I do not know why we changed her lightsaber color. that will never make
Justice
sense
for
to
green
me.
lightsabers. I don't know what's this obsession with Disney Star Wars with blue lightsabers, honestly.
Truly. But you know, again, those are just little things that it's like the fandom conversation frustrates me, but I learned to put it aside for Revenge of the Sith, and I think that kind of blended into Andor for me. I come away loving this show, appreciating everything it's been doing, you know, curious about what that, you know, 5-season version of this show could have looked like, knowing it never would have happened, you know,
Yeah,
and the way
it
the
wasn't.
streaming landscape is gone, it wouldn't have happened. So yeah, I absolutely love the show. I wish we had more time to talk, you know, just do entire hours on Dedra and K2
Hey, you
and
still
Seer
can. No one says
and
you
Saw.
can't. We're gonna
And
keep doing that at Triad. We're gonna keep celebrating
Sleep.
Andor for a way.
My sleep schedule says I can't.
yeah, that's the thing with Connor. But all of
I
that
mean,
to
I'm
say,
fine, but whatever.
what an incredible show, what an incredible series. And, you know, to kind of bring it home, like I've said before, with the negative space of hope, you know, Taylor was not watching the final episodes. She was still wanting to hang out in the living room, so she just put in her AirPods and she was bullshitting on her phone while it was on. And she looked up during the credits to see me so elated when I heard the Star Wars theme.
Mm.
And there was just something so cathartic about that. That felt like the final moment of painting with a broad brush, with those bright colors of no matter how dark this shit got, like mythical heroes are what are built by the sacrifices of all of these people here. And yeah, I hate to see Andor go. Part of me is looking forward to the conversations about it being able to kind of fade into the background, but I don't think that should tarnish the legacy of this incredible show. But yeah, I think that's all we got for you guys. Goose, where can the lovely people find you and what you do, my friend?
No, thank you first before I do that. Thank you first for inviting me over and talking about Andor. I mean, I've been wanting to talk about Andor, you know, as a whole for so long that I'm finally glad that we're getting the chance to just talk about it, you know, all the time. I just wish that I don't know, there's a part of me, and I don't mean to ramble, but there's a part of me that felt like during season one, like the conversations were so much bigger and sprawling across, you know, all the podcasting and content creation community. I don't know if this is a thing about the collapse of social media with everyone fractioning to, you know, all the different, you know, threads and blue sky and everything that's kind of like divided how we're engaging about it, but it definitely doesn't feel as big as season one. So like I'm relishing every opportunity to be able to talk about Andor. So thank you for having me. But yeah,
Thank
if
you for
you
coming.
wanna, you know, if you wanna keep listening to my ramblings, I do them with my co-host Nani over at Triad of the Force. We're a Puerto Rican podcast talking about Star Wars and other nerd-created media from our Puerto Rican / Latin perspective. Join us. You know, we're gonna be celebrating our 5th year this year as well in August or September, something like that. And you
Congratulations.
know, thank you. You can find us at Trial of the Force anywhere podcasts can be found, or also basically all social medias. But our main hub is the Blue Skies because we're, you know, we got that woke mind virus in there, so that's where we're living. So if you like what you've heard a little bit, you know, maybe consider checking us out. Nani dilutes me, so that might be a good thing for most of you. So, yeah, thank you. This has been amazing.
Of
I
course.
apologize for all the pets invading, though. The pets
No,
kind
do not
of got into one.
apologize for that at all. Listen, Ionized Bastards, every time Michael says something dramatic and haunting is salvage, it is immediately countered by Deuces going in the background. So
They decided like all
we're
at
used
once
to it.
just to come invade. I don't know what it was.
It's more than welcome. Connor, where can the lovely people find you, my man?
Shit, where can they find me? Blue Sky. At Deva Banana, which I like never use. Twitter. Actually, no. I'm gonna reactivate it for a bit for something specific, but I'll get into that. Also at Dapper Banana there. Instagram, ConmanJFO. I don't really use that too much. I also podcast over at For the Republic podcast, a love letter to Star Wars animation. A Star Wars animation that we haven't talked about in like months because of all the new stuff that's been coming out. So we need to get back into that, but you can find us over at Spotify, YouTube, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, pretty much wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can find our socials at For the Repub Pod, or you can just Google us. Just Google us. And you can also find me co-hosting and co-writing questions over at Star Wars in a Galaxy Epic Confrontations. You can find all of our past, present, and future matches over at the Star Wars in a Galaxy YouTube channel. And you can follow our social media over at In a Galaxy Trivia. We have a couple really good matches coming up soon. Our most recent match was my own co-host, Jared, versus Scotty Holiday. You can check that out over on the In a Galaxy YouTube channel. Yeah. That's all I got.
That was an absolute barn burner of a match. I was really happy with that. No spoilers. Go check that one out. It also features a cutscene appearance by Goose as well. So everybody on screen's involved in that episode. It's great. You guys can find me on Twitter or Blue Sky and Instagram. I'm still not used to saying it. Dark Jedi 2552. You can also find the Nerd Academy podcast on all social media as well as on wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Ionized Bastards next episode is coming out in a few days when we're recording this, but today when you're seeing this on Friday the 23rd. We are in the end game officially for Ionized Bastards. We got 3 episodes left and no spoilers, but I'm pretty sure Michael is going to let the final battle be 3 episodes long, and I've never been more scared for my life in this show ever. So check that out as we get into the end of Ionized Bastards and with a new campaign on the horizon as well. So stay tuned for that. Pro and New, we are wrapping up our season on Cowboy Bebop over in the Mitch 692 channel. So go check that out. I had all my complicated feelings about the end of Cowboy Bebop, and we're doing our, full series discussion episode coming out in a few days for you guys as well over there. Obviously, Epic Confrontations as well. Versus series is coming back soon, as well as our versus topic episodes. So check out the Patreon for that at the $5 tier. You get access to the back catalog of our old Patreon shows like Nerd Academy Movie Club, as well as our huge back catalog for the versus series as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Thank you to our $10 patrons, Paco, Ray Clausen, and Brendan Marr from Page Turners They Were Not, whom I will also be doing a show with this week as well. So stay tuned to his channel. But thank you also very much for tuning in. Goose, thank you for stopping by. I was like, it's been way too goddamn long since he's been on KNR. I need to remedy this. But yeah, thank you for coming through. Check out Triad of the Force. We are honored that you all have joined us. We have friends everywhere. And may the Force be with you always.
Stop! Move away from the cookie jar!